Now back to our lead story tonight, the conviction of 9 men for being part of a child exploitation ring who used young girls for sex. All but one of the men was from Pakistan. The 9th was from Afghanistan. Right-wing groups have claimed it illustrates the exploitation of young white girls by Asian men. For tonight's special report, our correspondent Darshna Soni has been investigating the evidence to support that claim that the crime is racially based and talking to those involved in investigating it.
I was 12. The men were in their late 20s.
They obviously made her feel quite special. I think she was in love with them.
I was in a relationship with one. Then he would start asking me to have sex with his brothers, his friends.
The main gift, I suppose, would be just picking her up and taking her out.
They target the most vulnerable, teenagers, often young girls, befriended by older men who go on to abuse, rape and exploit them.
In the last 10 years, there's been a huge increase in on-street grooming, as it's known, especially in the North and in the Midlands. Controversially, the victims have been reported as mainly white, the perpetrators as Pakistani Muslims. But what's the truth about these claims? And why is it still happening a decade after the issue was first raised?
At first, he came over as quite a nice man.
We've spoken to the mother of a victim, a mother who watched helplessly as her daughter came under the influence of an older boyfriend, a British Pakistani man she'd met through Facebook.
She used to be really sporty. She had loads of interests, but she just became a completely different person. She was really aggressive and defensive. She just didn't want to spend any time with us at all.
We've agreed to protect the identity of the mother and her daughter, whom we'll call Emma. She was just 14. Her boyfriend worked in his father's takeaway. He told her he loved her.
She just trusted somebody who destroyed her trust, really. He just passed her around to other people for his own pleasure. It's quite evil, really.
So it must have been incredibly frustrating for you as a parent. But what do you say to people who say that parents also have to take responsibility for knowing where their daughters are at night and who they're mixing with?
We did try. We didn't always allow her out, and we were really strict with her. I don't know if that backfired, though, because then she just said, if you don't let me out, I'm just going to run away anyway.
What's shocking about Emma's story is that she's now living with one of the men who abused her. Although her mum went to the police and social services, she was told they couldn't press charges because, like many girls, Emma didn't see herself as a victim. Some campaigners have claimed that the authorities are reluctant to tackle the issue of grooming because of political correctness. A number of police forces we approached don't even record the ethnicity of offenders, something that's been exploited by the far right.
It is a Muslim issue because it's religiously justified as long as it's other people's children and not their own.
There is nothing in the culture of Pakistani men that encourages you to be involved in these crimes.
Mohammed Shafiq is a campaigner who believes sensitivities around race have meant that the authorities and the community have been reluctant to deal with the issue. Although the majority of child sex abusers are white, he says there is a particular problem in some towns with Muslim gangs.
Is the Muslim community in denial about this issue?
Well, we've got an issue. They have parallel lives. So in the community they're married and they have children, which is respectability, but they don't want to mix that with their outside interest of child grooming. So they want to keep it separate, and that's why they think it's easier, because they can do what they like with these white girls and nobody will find out in the community.
Recent high-profile convictions have involved mainly Pakistani gangs, but does this prove that they're more likely to commit on-street grooming than others? The quality of available data is extremely poor. According to one recent study, of 940 individuals whose ethnicity was recorded, 38% were white and 26% Asian. Of 230 gangs, 16% were white, 18% Asian, the rest were unrecorded. Statistically, Asians represent 8% of the general population, Pakistani Muslims just 1%. So how have the authorities been responding to the issue of race?
We're en route to the subject address as planned.
We were given exclusive access to Derby Police's Child Exploitation Unit. It's 6 a.m. and detectives are on their way to confront a suspected groomer. The 27-year-old man has been texting a 15-year-old girl.
Yeah, have you contacted this child at all?
Yes, that's true.
Okay.
I'm contact.
Yes.
I'm not touching nothing.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
The man insists he's never touched her and claims she keeps texting him.
Million times text me. She said, I love you. I see.
This is common in many grooming cases and can complicate efforts to bring prosecutions. He's issued with a child abduction notice, one of the powers available to police when an actual crime hasn't been committed.
Also, you must not provide this young person with any food, drink, gift or any other item, okay?
No.
The man lives alone and hasn't been in the country for very long. The police often have to deal with cultural differences around the age of consent.
Are the police too politically correct or too worried about offending the Muslim community to investigate street grooming properly?
I wouldn't say that is the case. It may require some negotiations or speaking to community leaders. Sometimes that is the way forward. But overall, it will never stop a police investigation.
The force insists that speaking to community leaders before making arrests isn't the same as being afraid to investigate. Detectives say they learnt lessons following Operation Retriever in 2010. This footage shows members of a British-Pakistani gang picking up young, mainly white girls. A subsequent review criticised care agencies for missing opportunities to protect the girls. Victims are often from vulnerable backgrounds with chaotic lifestyles.
I started having a lot of arguments at home. I started playing up at school.
We've spoken to this teenager who was just 12 when she was groomed. Whenever she ran away from home, she was offered somewhere to stay by a group of older men.
There was loud music and there were drugs and everyone was laughing and joking.
But they soon started asking for sexual favours in return for letting her stay.
The other lads would ask me to do stuff with them and I'd think, why is my boyfriend asking me to have sex with someone else? Like it was dodgy, but I didn't really think hardly anything of it.
Many victims are now being targeted over the internet and social networking sites. But those who work with young people worry that the emphasis on Muslim street gangs has meant these more prevalent forms of grooming are being overlooked.
It's not always a Muslim issue. Concentrating on one area of a community as abusers is not always helpful because other people might get ignored.
It's clear that much more research is needed, but this is such an emotive subject that many insist on defining it as a racial rather than sexual crime, despite the statistics proving inconclusive. Darshna Soni, Channel 4 News.
Well, our social affairs editor Jackie Long joins us live now from Liverpool, where the case took place. Jackie, police have denied that race has anything to do with it. What do you make of that?
Well, the issue of race has never been far from this case. We've had demonstrators from the far right outside the court on occasions, and inside the court, one of the defendants was ejected by the judge because of his outburst, claiming that the entire trial was racist because the jury were all white. But today the police have come out, the CPS, representatives of the Muslim community in Rochdale where the offences took place, to state categorically that these crimes have got nothing to do with race, they have nothing to do with religion, and they have everything to do with vulnerable girls being sexually exploited.
Well, now, this is not the first case of its kind that we've come across, obviously. Is there a real strategy for dealing with it?
Well, one of the reasons this crime is so difficult to tackle is because of the really grimly effective way that grooming works. As we've heard, many of these girls allow these men to go on abusing them because they believe mistakenly that they're in love with them, that the men are their boyfriends. And grooming creates a sort of perverse story around what's happening, that the girls are giving sex in exchange for something else, as if they're somehow complicit in what's going on. When actually what the organisations who work with these girls are saying authorities need to take on board is that fundamentally this is about men raping and sexually abusing children, in this case as young as 13, in other cases younger. And that is what the authorities need to keep at the forefront of their mind if they're to make any inroads into tackling this problem.
Jackie Long in Liverpool. Kathy.
Thanks, John.